We are starting today with someone really special to me, Aidan Goggins. I've known Aidan for years. He's been helping me with, keeping the health of the household, very healthy, especially with my son, with my 20 years old son, who decided to train athletically, high performance athletically, and he's helping him and really guiding him. And I'm not going to spend too much time discussing about what you can find on Aidan's website, because I don't think you can easily check that yourself. I'm going to tell you personally my own experience with Aidan. I met Aidan, as I said, many years ago, but I specifically started working with him after I had COVID in October. I've been really hit with it, I would say quite hard. And I've had a good treatment with my doctor. I've had antibiotics, steroids, and everything that I needed to recover from it. It took me a long time. And after I felt much better, I still was feeling that something was really wrong in my body. It wasn't what I thought it should have been. So I contacted Aidan and I said, I really need your help. And this is when he started doing specific tests on me. He really came up with a protocol that, I have to say, really saved me completely. I'm totally recovered and I feel better than ever, really, much better in my body than pre-COVID. And all these years, I thought that working, I really worked hard, I have to say, on getting my emotional and spiritual self, into a better place. And I thought that my body will naturally follow. And I was really, I think, very far from the truth, because having learned a lot from Aidan, I really realized that the body really needs the right attention, the right nutrition. And it's not just what you read or hear about. I was very interested with the book that Aidan wrote. It's called Third Food Diet, that you can, again, know more about on his website. And he might say a few words about it. And I just feel totally different. And I really wanted to share this with you all, on top of what Andrew can offer for us to really feel healthier emotionally and in our body. So Aidan, thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate your time. And I'm going to let you start. And then after that, we'll have a few questions probably. And then Andrew will take over. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Lara. If there's any connection issues or anything like that, just let me know. But thanks for having me, and it's great to be here. Just as a bit of background, by background, I'm a pharmacist. I actually started off in the pharmaceutical industry, and then I used to work in community pharmacy. And basically, I got very fed up with that and demotivated that I could see myself as little more than a tablet counter. Most times when people came to me, they were on so many medicines, you really weren't having any impact in terms of prevention or even treatment, I would say. We were mainly in symptom management. So I always had an interest in nutrition from a personal perspective and a family one. So I did my master's in nutritional medicine in the University of Surrey. After that, I wrote the book, The Health Delusion, in 2012, which was a kind of myth buster in health and nutrition. And that was the Medical Journalists Association book, Health Book of the Year award. I work with a high-end clinic now in London, so I work with a lot of people either with chronic diseases or health issues that don't get satisfaction from traditional medicine. And because the basis of my work is how we optimize our bodies to work best for us, to get the cells in our bodies to function the way they should be, I actually ended up, by total coincidence, working in elite sports performance, because elite athletes are people that put such a demand and strain on their bodies that they need to rely on them to, day in, day out, campaign in and campaign out to give them the optimal performance that, to reap the benefits of their training. So I ended up working with a lot of elite athletes, including like former heavyweight champion David Haye, former champion Amir Khan, UFC champion Conor McGregor, currently working with the INEOS Team UK, Sir Ben Ainsley's team for the America's Cup, who are luckily in New Zealand, so they're not affected by COVID at the moment. And we're currently 5 out of 5 for our races for that, so looking very bright to try and bring home the America's Cup this year. And then in 2016, I wrote the book, The Third Food Diet, which was basically a new way to look at diet that instead of looking at how we always focus on calories, what we should not be eating or restricting our food, or calories in, we never look at how we process those calories. It's always about how much calories we eat, or what foods we're eating, what foods should we not. We never actually question why our body's not processing those calories the way other people do. Why do we have these weight issues? Why do we have these metabolic issues? So the circular diet is based upon the premise that plant foods contain key chemicals called phytonutrients that work at a genetic level that alter how our cells function to improve how we metabolize food, to rejuvenate our cells, to basically kickstart our cells to function the way they should always be. And that diet that book done very well. It's currently translated in 20 different languages across 5 continents. And even though it's out in 2016, it's been still very popular and was most recently accredited for the weight loss of the singer Adele, which was always a very welcome publicity bump. But what Lara asked me to do to speak to you today about is she just felt that in the narrative, the time that we're living in, and the narrative we're getting, especially when it comes to COVID, that it was people were feeling kind of helpless and powerless. She asked me to speak in terms of what can we do about immune health. Because I'm not here to talk about, we just even today announced that over 100,000 people have died. So I'm not here to shift the narrative in the sense to say that COVID isn't this, very virulent, very deadly, for certain population disease that has devastating impacts. But what I want to tell people is there's a lot that we can do to mitigate that, to reduce our risk. And those messages aren't getting out there. And that's why and some of you will have heard some of it, and maybe not others, or you might have heard conflicting things. But I'll run through a few things, and then maybe the best thing will be to take some questions then at the end. But it really isn't surprising that the UK, when you look at the population, that the UK has been hit harder than most countries. And it isn't surprising that we get this peak at this time of year. And it isn't surprising either that we've got this mutated strain that's arisen in the UK and countries like South Africa. But anyway, we'll cover that. So the first thing I think we're going to go into the kind of one that everyone's probably heard about would be vitamin D. And even at government level, a few months ago, they financed an investigation to look at vitamin D at a population level. Should people be taking it? Because it seems that vitamin D levels are strongly linked with people's risk of getting COVID, people's risks of high symptoms of COVID, and people's risk of dying from COVID. And in a recent study that just came out in the last few weeks, that was the conclusion that they came out with a review of the research, the most up-to-date research. And the reason is that even though we consider vitamin D is traditionally, but we consider it bone health, is that vitamin D actually alters the function of between about 200 and 500 genes in the body. And a lot of these are linked to our immune health. What it does is it stimulates the production of these antimicrobial and antiviral proteins that align the mucosal lining of our cells, so that when we become exposed to viruses, we're much more likely to fight them off. And vitamin D also helps regulate a thing called T regulatory cells, and basically they keep our immune system in check. So as COVID progresses or other diseases or viruses progress, our immune system become overactivated. You may have heard of a process called cytokine storm that's affecting a lot of people. And that's where the immune system is hyperactivated beyond what it should be. And we know that vitamin D levels are linked to reducing this impact. The key thing with vitamin D is it activates a thing called our innate immune system. This is the early immune system that's to support when we get exposed to different pathogens, which means is the time for taking vitamin D is it needs to be in your system at the time of exposure to the virus. And what we know is that 87% of the UK population, especially at this time of the year, have suboptimal vitamin D levels, and 50% are actually deficient in vitamin D. The reason for this is that we get our vitamin D predominantly from sunlight. There's really not many food sources, mainly sun-dried mushrooms or fortified foods. But as a general rule, 95% of vitamin D comes from sunlight. And in the UK, because of the latitude that we actually only make vitamin D between April and October, which means that on a winter's day, even if it's sunny out, you don't make vitamin D. And it means that during the summer, we build up our vitamin D reserves. But as we enter into the autumn and the winter, they decline. And it's in February and March where our vitamin D are at our lowest levels. And if we don't take supplementation, it means that we become we're at a higher risk of succumbing to these viral diseases. So even well before COVID, there was studies done on vitamin D where they showed those who had the highest levels of vitamin D, or the recommended levels of vitamin D, I should say, had much lower upper respiratory tract infections than those who didn't. And as research started coming out on vitamin D in COVID, they found that those who had a vitamin D level of 75 nanomoles per liter, had the lowest level of COVID symptoms. So to put that in context, in the wintertime, the average person in the UK is below 50. We want to get our levels of 75 nanomoles to support our immune system in advance of should it become in contact with respiratory pathogens. So we know that as a general rule, the average person in the UK needs, in the winter months at a minimum, 1,000 to 2,000 international units of vitamin D a day as a supplement. The standard government recommendation in the UK is 400 international units. That's based on bone health. None of the recommendations have been updated in the last 20 years. They're updated for what we know about immune health, but they have in America. So in America, the recommendation is a minimum of 800 international units. And in countries such as Canada, the recommendation has gone up to 2,000 international units per day. So the UK has lagged behind. It was hoped that with the COVID and the pandemic, as we try to prioritize our health, that these guidelines would change, but unfortunately they haven't. But as a general rule, ideally, if you can get your vitamin D level measured, you can get a dose tailored to you. But we know for the general population that dose of 1,000 to 2,000 international units a day will get you into that optimal range. And if you believe you're coming from a severely deficient state, you may need higher levels initially of 4,000 to 5,000, but they really should be based on a blood level, because otherwise you're guessing. And we know that too much vitamin D can have adverse effects. A lot of people who are being affected the most from COVID, especially in the UK, are the BAME collective. So the Black, Asian, and minor ethnicities in the UK. And we believe one of the reasons is that they have that much lower vitamin D levels because of the pigmentation in the skin, and with sun exposure and different cultural in clothing. We know that their vitamin D levels are naturally lower than Caucasians in the UK. And they've done this interesting study on NHS workers where they found that a lower level of vitamin D in Black, Asian, and minor ethnicities in the UK was linked to a 160% increase in COVID symptoms compared to those same workers who had sufficient levels of vitamin D. And all these workers were all working exposed to COVID patients. But with the low vitamin D level, those workers were much more likely to get off sick and have much more severe symptoms. So that would be the recommendation. During the summertime, most people can get by with sunlight exposure, but keep in context that you don't get it through windows. You don't, clothing blocks. So you need at least your arms and legs exposed to make sufficient vitamin D. Safe sun exposure, 15, 20 minutes between 10 and 3 p.m. And if you're using a sunblock, it blocks vitamin D production by about 99%. So if you're very safe in the sun, you probably need to supplement vitamin D all year round. So a lot of people would have heard of vitamin D already. The key thing is to make sure you're taking the right dose, to make sure that it's in your system already. It's a nutrient where the benefits are there if you filter look before you get exposed to the virus. A second nutrient I wanted to kind of mention to you today that you might not have heard of, as many of you compared to vitamin D, is a mineral called selenium. And if you haven't heard of selenium, it's actually one of the most important nutrients. It's the only mineral that's coded in the human genome, and it codes 25 proteins in the human body that all regulate inflammation, antioxidant, and an antiviral response. Selenium also regulates a thing called CD4 cells, which are immune cells which attack invading pathogens. So when the research first came out in China as COVID hit there in March, China has been such a large country and is a country with huge variation in selenium exposure, because they were able to link a huge difference between COVID mortality and outcomes versus the natural dietary selenium exposure, which they could measure average selenium intake over the previous months by doing hair samples. With the UK, we know that for the optimal selenium protein production, we need over 100 micrograms of selenium a day. The UK average is 56 micrograms a day. On average, the UK is severely deficient in selenium. We don't intake enough to make these critical selenoproteins that protect our immune system. But not only does it support how our immune system works, selenium has another really critical role. We've known that research on influenza viruses and previous coronaviruses in animal studies and animal models show that when people are deficient in selenium, it creates in our cells this oxidative stress reaction that causes the virus to mutate and make the virus more virulent and make the virus more severe. The UK is one of the worst populations in the world for selenium status, along with South Africa. And so we were warning months and months ago that if the selenium issue wasn't addressed, that the virus was most likely going to mutate into a more virulent version as a new season here where coronavirus is going to increase again, which is what we're experiencing now. At a general population level, we normally recommend that people intake about a supplement of selenium. The reason it's real low in the UK is because it comes from our soil, but the UK soil is stripped of selenium. In the US and other countries, they're actually quite plentiful in selenium, but the UK is very deficient. So we normally recommend a supplement, and we recommend about between 50 to 100 micrograms a day. Usually we recommend a bit higher for men because selenium is so beneficial, as well as for viruses for prostate health. What is important, though, especially for what I work in the area in the kind of West London, Chelsea area, is selenium has this huge interaction with a heavy metal called mercury. And mercury is relevant for anyone listening today who eats foods like a lot of fish, especially sushi or raw fish, or heavy metal rich fish, which includes swordfish, tuna, yellowtail, tilefish, carpaccio, Chilean sea bass, etc. Generally, any of the restaurants in around Chelsea, Knightsbridge that do sushi or fish are at fault of this and serving this high mercury fish. And what we find is, in most clients I test in my clinic in Chelsea, is elevated mercury levels. Mercury is not talked about much. People don't seem to be aware of the health impact it can have. And people see sushi and other foods as healthy. Mercury binds to selenium in the body and stops it from being used in the cell. So for for a normal average person who wants immune support from selenium, we need a level in the blood of about what's called 130 micrograms per litre. The UK is less than 90. For people who have a relatively high normal level of mercury that I commonly see, we know from studies that to get the benefits of selenium, we need to go up as high as 300 to 400 micrograms per litre. In the average healthy individual who doesn't have that mercury exposure, that would cause health issues for them. In the person who has mercury, they have to go to that level to reap the benefits. So it's so important that when you're considering selenium, that you're considering what is your mercury exposure as well, to make sure that you're actually reaping the benefits of your selenium supplement. The other big issue with mercury is it goes into our cells and it kicks out zinc. So it takes the place of zinc in our cells. And you may be aware of a lot of recommendations going around for zinc as an antiviral, as a COVID treatment, and even that zinc and, especially with the previous US president, the hydroxychloroquine, how it worked was to promote zinc into our cells, because zinc is only beneficial in viruses if it goes into our cells. If you've got a high mercury level or high mercury exposure, that removes zinc from your cells. So it's pointless just taking the zinc and having it in your bloodstream. It's about addressing how is the zinc getting into my cells, or is there anything that's stopping the zinc from being exposed of being in my cells. So of the messages that people are hearing about what they can do when it comes to what their immunity, coronavirus, I think selenium is so critical and it's overlooked, and that for certain subpopulations, that can be they really need a really individualized approach, that they may need a really targeted approach for selenium, taking account of a mercury status as well, which can really increase your risk of succumbing to COVID, and if you do the symptoms of COVID. Just the last one I'm going to mention is vitamin C. It's another one that you've probably heard me mentioned. Some points that you may not have heard of. Vitamin C is an antioxidant. It supports the immune system, and it's anti-inflammatory. So unlike something you may not have heard, there's a lot of mixed information about people to take big gram doses of vitamin C to support immune health. vitamin C needs to be kept for when you need it. So vitamin C can be taken as a supplement, but no more than 200 to 500 milligrams a day, which we know gives us maximum blood levels. Above this dose, if we do it long term, our body reduces the absorption of vitamin C, and our body increases how our kidneys get rid of vitamin C. What this means is that with increasing doses of vitamin C, over time, our blood levels of vitamin C actually drop. When we get exposed to viruses or stress or trauma, that's the time when our vitamin C starts getting depleted. And that's when the recommended doses of 1 to 3 to 4 grams a day are valid. However, if you've been taking super doses of vitamin C all along, your body has already shut down the absorption of vitamin C and increased excretion, that you will not be able to give yourself that acute increase in vitamin C exposure. So keep, as a general recommendation, is vitamin C as a maintenance should be kept at about 500 milligrams, 200 to 500 milligrams a day. And when you need it in times of stress, only for a few days, you up it into gram doses. So I had a client over recently, client that was in Dubai. His wife had put him on vitamin C, 2 grams a day is preventative. He flew over to the UK. He didn't bring his supplements with him. He got bloods done 7 days later, and he had the equivalent of scurvy because his absorption of vitamin C was so dramatically reduced because he was being exposed to such high levels. The supplement he was taking was now being removed, and he wasn't absorbing near enough from his diet. But that system of adjusting took too long to adjust. So he actually ended up making himself really susceptible to infection by what he was taking, what he thought was good for him. And we know that vitamin C is really important when it comes to the complication of pneumonia. And we know that people who are able to maintain those high levels of vitamin C in a later dose of infection have 30% less pneumonia when it comes to viruses, respiratory tract viruses such as COVID. So the key thing I would say is if you're already on the big doses of vitamin C, your levels will plummet and you'll find it really hard to get them back up again should you become exposed to a virus. So keep a low dose maintenance and then have it on standby to give yourself for the short period a high dose boost in vitamin C when your body will absorb it and give you the time, use it at the time that you need it. And then you wean back off then to the maintenance doses as you continue on. To me, those are the key critical things. We see a lot of things being recommended, a lot of protocols, I think, and a lot of super doses of nutrients and foods and things. But there are these 3 or 4 key factors address the UK population, and it's not even about using super doses. It's about we don't get near enough of them, and they make us really vulnerable and really susceptible. And correcting them, get the foundation right, and you will be much more equipped to deal with this. It's a very serious pandemic. It has a lot, it's causing huge destruction. But the fear factor, you don't have to feel powerless, and that fear factor does not need to be there. And all these things can be done as generic supplements, or even you can get your levels measured in labs with clinics and get, know exactly what you need, what your body shows, and what you need for prevention, and what you would need should you ever, be told that you've become exposed to a high risk or a positive test, etc. So that would be my recommendations, for this discussion.
Thanks, Aidan. That was fascinating. And I had no idea what you're going to talk about. And 2 of the things that I've been preoccupied with over the last 6 to 8 months has been vitamin D and selenium. And as people know, I go to a clinic in Germany every 6 months. And 7 years ago, my vitamin D level was 12. And it took me quite a problem getting it from 12 to 24. And then I got it from 24 to 30 something. And for the last 2 years, well, it was 50, and now I've got it up to 65. And over the last 5 months, I've given several talks in the City of London to businessmen and women, probably 600 people. And one of the questions I've asked them, how many people in the room know what their vitamin D level is? And out of 600 people, not one person knew what it was. And I'd be really interested how many people on this call know what their vitamin D level is. I've been monitoring my vitamin D level for the last 8 years, and I can tell you exactly what it is. I have it tested. And the same with selenium. I'm interested. One of my questions to you, which I'll come to in 1 minute, is since March last year, my wife, my daughter and I have been taking 4 Brazil nuts every day. 4... what's the nut that...
Brazil nuts, probably. Brazil nuts, yeah.
Yeah. And my understanding, I don't know if it's right, is that those nuts are the highest content in selenium, and 3 or 4 a day will give you enough. But anyway, we've been doing that every day since last March. But for me, what I got from your talk is that I think there is precious little responsibility in the UK for people to take responsibility for their inner life, their inner nutrition, their inner resistance. There's all this frenzied focus on this threat from outside. And for me personally, I can honestly say I have no fear of COVID because I think my immunity is strong. In fact, I know it's strong. I got COVID and I didn't know I'd had it. I had very strong COVID antibodies, but I had no symptoms, absolutely nothing. And I think that these 2 or 3 items are just illustrative of how we need to take more responsibility, find out, have more awareness. What is our vitamin D level? What is our selenium level? How you explain vitamin C, I thought was fascinating. So I'd be interested in other people sharing, and please ask Aidan any questions. Brazil nuts is what we've been taking every day.
Can I just comment on? Can I just comment on that quickly? Because I forget actually probably one of the points is because firstly, my thing is always like a food first approach. So when you look at the supplements I recommend, generally, especially unless they're based on blood tests, that's very limited. And because what I say to people is there's so many hundreds of nutrients. We focus on a few. Your diet provides a lot more. If you show low in a nutrient, you're probably not just missing out that nutrient in the foods it contains, but many more that we never measured. However, when it comes to selenium, there are very few food sources because it's not in our soil. You can get it through things like shellfish, crab, prawns and things, but not at the level that we probably need on a daily basis. The reason I don't recommend Brazil nuts is Brazil nuts are actually defined as as part of a fairy diet, but they contain barium and radium, so I wouldn't include them in your daily diet. The other thing is selenium is a very specific nutrient. It's so precise. We're talking about if you don't get selenium, it can cause severe diseases. Yet all you need to correct that is the size of 1 grain of sugar. The Brazil nut, depending on whether it's from the Amazon or where it is gone from, can vary in a selenium content between 1 microgram and 1,000 micrograms of selenium per nut. So you taking 4, you could get 4 micrograms a day, would be nowhere near enough. We could get 4,000 micrograms, which is toxic, and we know linked to diabetes, skin cancer, things like that. Now, you might average it out that you're actually working out fine, but it's such a precise, there's certain nutrients, just like your vitamin D, that you're monitoring all the time. Selenium is really specific. We know it has a U-shaped curve of benefit, but too much is as bad as too little because it's so reactive. It's like it's a reactive metal in the body. And so it's one of the few cases where I tell people, forget about food sources for selenium and get your daily supplement in.
Okay.
And dose it to that, yeah.
So that's fantastic. Thank you. Should we open it up to questions, Zara?
Yes. I have a few questions. So if you're taking a large doses of vitamin C, how do you suggest weaning off it?
Yeah. So if you're taking large doses, I'm not sure how high those doses are, but straight away you could drop down to 2 grams a day anyway, because you'll still get benefits from them. And then you really have to drop it down by from the 2 grams, you go over about 4 to 5 days to 1.5 grams, 4 to 5 days, 1 gram, then 4 to 5 days, 750, 4 to 5 days, 500, and just keep it at that for a continued period. But you really have to wean off it slowly to allow the absorption mechanisms in the stomach to recover and the renal excretion in the kidneys to reduce as well.
Okay. Bridget, I guess we answered your question about the high level of selenium. If there is anything else you'd like to know, please don't hesitate. I have, so another question. Having had kinesiology for years, I have seen how your body likes one brand of supplement and not another. How do we know which one to take that will suit us?
So when it comes to selenium, it's a good example. A lot of multivitamins use a thing called sodium selenite, which is a very reactive metal, which we don't really recommend. It's the cheapest version. What we recommend is that you stick to the form that's found normally in your diet. So if your diet wasn't depleted in it, you would get it through your normal food and wouldn't avoid it. So that's usually what people tolerate best. So with selenium, there's 2 forms: selenomethionine, which is the amino acid form, and selenium yeast. If anyone has any yeast issues, they stay away from selenium yeast and go selenomethionine, which is the amino acid. So generally the safest form to take in case there's any yeast issues. But if you don't have yeast issues, you can take either of them.
And what are the effects? Sorry.
I was just going to say with vitamin D, just take vitamin D3 as the best form. They'll all be similar. Vitamin D3 is the best form. And with vitamin C, some of them is usually based on a reputable manufacturer. Some of them just don't absorb very well, but usually a reputable manufacturer will get a good response from.
And what are the effects of overdosing on vitamin D, Aidan?
Vitamin D is, you need to forget about it as a vitamin almost, and it's actually a hormone, and that's why we don't really get it from the diet at all, because it's sunshine steroid, and it's like any hormone that you get out of balance or take too much of, that you will experience side effects. We don't really fully understand the effects on the immune system at higher doses. What we do know is that as you get above a certain level, when we look at death rates, they start to increase. So the benefits on the immune system seem to stop. We know when it comes to bone health, where vitamin D is much more studied, that vitamin D is really really important for strong bones up to a certain level, and above that, it actually breaks down the bones quite quickly. So it's almost like thyroid hormones. Too little of thyroid hormone, you have weak bones. Too much of thyroid hormone, your bones turn over too quickly. Vitamin D actually works in a similar level. So you need to consider it similar to a thyroid hormone, that actually you just want to be in the sweet spot. Too much isn't great either.
I'm laughing reading this question because it's, how difficult it has been for me to. It's regarding the removal of mercury and other heavy metals. Do you have a protocol you recommend? I hear coriander can help remove heavy metals. Any thoughts? If coriander does, I'm going to really be upset with you, Aidan.
The first thing is to identify the source. So you have to remove. There's no point trying to detox. If you haven't removed what's contributing to it, whether it be dietary. So 95% of the time it's fish, but there can be other sources, including fillings, or if anyone's working in a certain industry with mercury exposure. It depends on your level. Mercury at a certain level, it's like your body when you gain weight. At a certain level of obesity, you just gain weight faster and faster. At a certain level of mercury, your ability to detox becomes much reduced. Things like coriander, things like chlorella, things like N-acetylcysteine support the natural detox. But if your blood test shows a high level, or even you can do a tissue test to see if it's in the deep tissues, such as the liver, bone, or even the brain. If these are very high and a natural detox really doesn't work, you would really need to go on a chelating agent course. But yeah, first things is get a level measured, identify the source, try natural detoxing. But if you find it's very slow, not having much impact, you would probably need to go on chelation. So that would be a product such as DMSA or something. But it's important that it be carried out very carefully.
Should we be taking daily doses of glutathione and also alpha lipoic acid?
No, I don't recommend glutathione. I only recommend it in really critical cases where the body is totally overwhelmed, so you can't rely on your own production. The reason for this is, firstly, number one, if you take oral glutathione, your stomach breaks it down fully, so you don't actually absorb it as glutathione. But the main reason is glutathione is a really powerful antioxidant, and that's why it's called the longevity molecule. But glutathione is one, and it's a major antioxidant, but it's still only one antioxidant of a whole complicated stress resilience and detoxification system in the body that controls about 500 genes and proteins. And that system is called the NRF2 system. And that stimulates many beneficial chemicals, including quinones and reductases, as well as glutathione. And how it works is it works through a feedback system. So if you add in glutathione to your body, it sends back a signal to the NRF2 system to reduce its activity. And that might be fine in terms of glutathione because you've now got plenty of it. But all those other chemicals that NRF2 pathway stimulates are beneficial for our cell health, for our resilience to stresses, for how our mitochondria function. They all get reduced as well. So we know that glutathione is only beneficial in an acute setting where we know that our own systems are overwhelmed, so we need that help as a bandage, basically. But as a long-term general health system, it actually has a longer-term negative effect.
Aidan, one more. Is there any recommended trusted brand for us?
Missed that. I recommend a trusted brand for
supplements.
For supplements.
Oh, just in general?
Yes.
Yeah, we find Thorne, Thorne, a US company, are very reputable. And with the supplements we test, theirs usually always bring up blood levels. And when it comes to vitamin C, we recommend a specific type of vitamin C called Pureway, Pureway, and it seems to just hold in the body longer than other vitamin Cs. Because when we do fasted vitamin C tests, where people haven't taken that vitamin C for say 24 hours, we find the levels are always quite low. Where with the Pureway one, we seem to be able to retain it much better.
One more. Can you recommend for children? I know they're not affected at present, much, but with this new variant, especially, I don't know if you heard about it in Brazil, it seems to be affecting children. Any recommendation for them of, alimentation or what to give them? Do we give them supplements?
It's the exact same, but just not the exact same doses, because children have to suffer the same issues, that they don't get sun exposure, and so they have low vitamin D. The issue is you just rain down the doses. So for like infants or young children, there's already vitamin D recommendations of about 300 international units for infants and very young children, and that actually works very well because of the smaller body size. And we generally recommend then that goes up 400, 600, 800 as you go through different ages. And then in late teens, follow the adult doses. And the same with selenium. With children, we would use something like 12.5 in young children, 25 micrograms in primary elementary level school children, and 50 micrograms in secondary school children of selenium. So it's just about basically adjusting these doses almost proportionally to body weight to be given. And in terms of vitamin C, we might recommend about 100 milligrams as a daily top up. And again, if they need a boost, they could take it in 500 milligram doses then up to, but not super doses, because you don't want to build up oxalic acid crystals in their kidneys because they won't be as developed. So keep the vitamin C in the lower end.
Okay. And the liposomal vitamin C, is it something you recommend, or?
We've seen liposomal vitamin C. We actually haven't tested it in the clinical setting to see how it affects blood levels. So I hear it works well, but I just know the Pureway vitamin C work. I just know we tested that, but I'm nothing against the liposomal one.
Andrew, I have questions for you. If you can, we give a break to Aidan, a little break. How do you suggest we? It's been really difficult. And I know the beginning of COVID, many people have been, in a way, I wouldn't say totally relieved, but for many people, it was an opportunity to just take a break, be home, and just allow themselves to think about more of what they want, what's been happening. And now it's starting to be a bit long, this being in prison like this. Can you just remind us briefly how to keep our calm? And now we know that there is a lot we can do to boost our immune system, to feel that we are more in control for not catching, or if we do catch, get rid of the virus quickly. If you could remind us a little bit on, maybe few routines, daily routines to stay grounded and calm and hopeful.
I'm not sure I'm going to comment too much on practical routines, but what I've been saying to people for 20 years or more is that all of us, we have an image, we have a persona that we meet the world with. And the greater the gap between the image and the truth, the reality, the bigger the problem. And that's true for individuals, and it's true for organizations, businesses, it's true for groups, and it's true for countries. That if we're walking around presenting ourselves to the world as someone very, very different from the reality, sooner or later, the collapse and the problem is going to be exposed as a very serious problem. And I think exactly the same is true of COVID. I think that as a species, as a community, we've been living in a very unsustainable way. We've been living with a big image. We're a very narcissistic culture. And I think the prolongation of COVID is directly related to how far off the path we've been. And one of the things, as many people have commented on, is COVID is inviting us to stop living from the outside so much and to connect more with the inside. We're all given opportunities to be at home, to be with ourselves, to go for walks in nature. And the only solution that I can find is to be more comfortable with ourselves, to listen to ourselves more, to walk more, to learn to listen to intuition, to learn to listen to our gut instinct. Because more than half of the population is in a frenzy listening to the outside. We've been listening to the outside for hundreds of years. And various people throughout history, wise men and women, have come along and tried to explain to us that we need to listen more to the inside. And by and large, we've ignored them and got on with the old ways. And from my perspective, it's just one view. The longer we continue to listen to these so-called external experts, the longer we live our lives with a reliance on external authority, then the longer the problem is going to continue. And the extent to which we put our time and our energy and our financial resources into building the old system, the longer our suffering will be. Because the lesson is to learn, and this is directly correlated by what Aidan talked about. The lesson is to learn, rather than worrying about the threat from outside or the wisdom from outside. It is to learn to take responsibility for our own inner wisdom and our own inner resistance to the world. And if we begin to do that, we will create a completely different world.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Andrew. I know it's really hard sometimes to just remember that, but when I hear you talk, and it just makes so much sense. It resonates really well. I don't know about the other, but we just have to keep reminding ourselves that.
I think everyone on the call has a reasonable level of experience of learning to listen to themselves. You know, we weren't taught this in schools. We weren't taught this in families particularly, although there are communities that have been living this way for thousands of years. And we came along and we labeled them primitive and we called ourselves civilized. And we're learning to turn back, but it's a relearning. And we need to support each other. The point of these gatherings is to support each other, to remind us. I need daily reminding that it's about the inside. And one of the things that people have commented on time and again is this is a period for understanding that the invisible, the unseen, is infinitely more powerful than the visible or the seen. You know, it's back to this idea. Most other species, most animals understand this intuitively. They're attuned to the invisible. And for us, we need to relearn this, to reconnect with the invisible, the unseen, and to put our confidence in that, rather than relying on the external images, the external voices, the external authorities. And it's happening. And I think people who are doing that feel a level of lightheartedness in their life, a level of crafting a new pathway. And I think what we're going through at the moment is very exciting. Actually, I feel excited most days. And I don't want to sound, sticking out from the crowd or whatever, but we're going through an amazingly exciting transition at the moment. And, we can craft a different pathway by listening to ourselves more.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you both so much. Aidan, I don't know if you can bear just one very quick question, one more. The elderberry and what is it called? Colloidal silver. Is it something that's useful on top of all you said? Elderberry, I guess.
The elderberry, they have these specific anthocyanins in them that help with reduce viral replication in the early symptoms. So if you take it for upper respiratory tract infections, so there is evidence around that at the early stages. The same with zinc lozenges where they coat the throat, and colloidal silver has natural antidisinfectant, antimicrobial actions. I know it does work like that. Obviously, when the virus and things gets into your cells, it becomes a different scenario, whether it will have any impact. There are different things. There's lots of different things we can do, all the way from taking things like medicinal mushrooms to boost our immune system, to taking adaptogens. But I think the key thing really is all those things are a surplus to the physiological needs of the body. And I guess that would be really the take-home message today. Get the critical nutrients that your body needs at essential for it just to do its function. Get them correct and get them right. And then you can bring in those extra boosts on top of that. But without doing that, I mean, it's like not laying the foundation properly of a house, in my opinion. So just make sure that foundation of cellular health is there, and make sure you tick those boxes of selenium, vitamin D, vitamin C, and making sure there's no excess of mercury in the body.
Okay, great. Thank you really ever so much, Aidan. It's so good to hear you. I've learned so much from you. I just feel a different person, because I know now that what I thought was very healthy before, you've explained so clearly that it could actually work against us. And it's really helpful to feel a little bit of empowerment over our daily lives, and just try and protect ourselves rather than being so fearful all the time. So thank you so much.
Exactly. I mean, these things, you can do them, and you can take control of them. You can know exactly what your levels are. You can know exactly what you need, and you can know that you tick those boxes. And the thing to remember is, obviously everyone needs to look after their own health and their underlying conditions. But if you do tick those boxes, you are doing more than 95% of the population. So you should feel like you have that. Yeah. You should be, and this is another reason why you should be vulnerable. You should not, you should feel more confident anyway, is how I would say it.
Thank you so much. And Andrew, as ever, thank you for everything. So good to see you and to start these again. I look forward to next month. And Aidan, to speak to you soon. Thank
you, Aidan. Thank you so much.
Bye, Aidan. Thank you.
God bless.
Bye, Andrew. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.